It started with a miracle. One moment, Brent Michael's physical arm was paralyzed, frozen at the elbow. The next, after a single session of energy healing, he watched in disbelief as his arm came back to life. That moment didn't just restore his body, it shattered everything he thought he knew about science, spirit, and the limits of human potential. You say that you cracked the code of consciousness.
I'd been told by the best doctors there was no chance of recovery. I couldn't work. I had no money. I was living with my parents.
I'm Scott Allan, and you're listening to the Enlightened Life podcast, where we explore the mysteries of the soul's journey, healing, and transformation. Let's get started.
I always like to start my interviews by letting everyone know, oh my gosh, I never thought I'd do anything like this.
Yeah.
As you told me 30 years ago, I'd be teaching energy healing, helping people to elevate their consciousness and experience miracles, I would have laughed you out of the room. Because growing up, I was pretty much your typical nerd or indoor kid, we called ourselves at the time. You know, I loved Dungeons and Dragons and Star Wars and all that kind of stuff. And the one thing that was a huge passion for me growing up was video games. I loved all the early video games, you know, Pac-Man, Donkey Kong, Galaga. And so it was always part of my vision was I wanted to be a video game developer. That was my dream. And I went to college at MIT, and that was fascinating because when I got to MIT, I discovered the internet. Now, I know that sounds funny today, but when I got to MIT, it was still the 1980s, and no one had heard of the internet. And long story short, I became an expert in networking technology. Went on to graduate school at MIT, where I was part of the World Wide Web Consortium. Me and two guys in my lab, we sent the first ever live synchronized audio video stream over the web in 1994. So we're doing some really cool things. And I really thought the internet boom was my gold rush. So I left MIT, grabbed my best friend, and we started a website company. And it's kind of funny. Did you know the very first website I ever created was the website for the launch of the Sony PlayStation? That was my very first project. And so we had a lot of success with the websites. We did the first website for the Sony PlayStation. We did the website for Nissan Motors. We did the Disneyland website. But my passion was still video games. So we started a second company to make online games. And that was really the straw that broke this camel's back. That I was there as the primary coder and visionary for not one, but two internet startups right at the start of the internet boom. And long story short, I was working myself 60, 80, sometimes 100 hours a week. It was nuts. I was just working nonstop because at the time I figured, well, I'm willing to sacrifice a couple of years of my life working because I thought I'd build up the companies and sell them and make millions of dollars. And my plan was by the time I was 30, I wanted to retire to some tropical island and spend my days hot tubbing with supermodels. That was the plan.
How'd that work it out for you?
Well, you know, there's that old saying, you know, the easiest way to make God laugh?
Yeah.
Just tell him your plans.
Right.
So
That's
instead
funny.
of living a life of luxury and hedonism, I started to have a lot of pain. It started minor, you know, little bit of stiffness, little shooting pain, but it just built and got worse and worse and worse to where it got so bad I was in so much pain I could hardly move some days. I went from working 100 hours a week to 80 to 60 to 40 to about 15. And at first I didn't panic because I went to doctors and I figured the doctors will know what to do, right? Had always taken care of me up to that point. And long story short, I spent 3 years in physical therapy, and it just kept sending me for more and more and more physical therapy, and it didn't help at all. It wasn't just I wasn't getting better, I kept getting worse. And it all blew up in 1998 when it was kind of funny. After three and a half year process, I finally got in to see the head doctor at the Kerlan Jobe Clinic, which is one of the top physical therapy clinics in the world. That's where a lot of the Olympians, the professional athletes go. When you hear about the big star athletes having surgery, it's always someone there that's doing it. And I was so excited because I thought, wow, I've been in so much pain. My life has been so difficult. This guy will know what to do. And I was so excited. I remember I was like putting X's on my calendar. It was like waiting to get my driver's license. I was so excited. And I remember I went in to see him, and he had all my medical records. And he just looked at him and looked at me and said, well, I'm sorry, son, but there's nothing our eye and our doctor can do here. You're always going to be in pain and you'll never be able to work again. And I was stunned because that's not what I expected. I expected some treatment, a surgery,
Right.
go get acupuncture. I had no idea what to expect, but it was something. But instead, he told me that he was going to recommend me for lifetime disability because he felt no matter how much treatment I got, there was no chance I could ever recover. There was no chance I'd ever be out of pain or I could ever work a normal job. And that was devastating. And when I went to go tell my best friend and business partner, I figured he'd be all, Brent, hang in there. We'll get through this together. I got your back. No, just the opposite. It turned out he had been secretly dating the woman I was crazy in love with. And he used the problem with
Oh,
my health as an opportunity. And it's a whole long drama we don't have to get into, but there was forged documents and all this stuff that he used that as an excuse to push me out and turned around and sold the website company for millions of dollars behind my back.
oh my
And
gosh.
that was something that was built up. That was my talent, my blood, my sweat, my tears went into that company. And he got all the money. And so that was really what they call a dark night of the soul, a total wipeout. Everything was wrong. I was in terrible chronic pain. I couldn't work. I had no money. I was living with my parents. I'd been told by the best doctors there was no chance of recovery, that I was just wasting my time. And I had been sent home to die at 27 years old. Isn't that crazy?
Awful.
And at first I spiraled, which I think is understandable. I started day drinking. I was using drugs, engaging in dangerous behavior. I was suicidal. At minimum, I had a big death wish. But I was very lucky that I had a friend turn me on to positive thinking. And he said, hey, Brent, when life's really got you down, positive thinking can help turn it around. And long story short, I became like total gung ho positive thinking warrior for about 6 months. I go to seminars and jump on the stage and make my vision board and all the stuff we've seen from The Secret. But it didn't help. It was so frustrating. It didn't help me at all. So I gave up on positive thinking and then I got into alternative medicine. And when I was first into alternative medicine, I thought, hey, maybe this will do the trick. And so, long story short, I started running up a gigantic credit card debt, running around doing all this alternative medicine. I went to Chinese doctors and got acupuncture and herbs. I went to homeopaths and I went to osteopaths and got adjustments and spiritual chiropractors. And I did cleanses and I did these special diets. And I had these chi machines and vibration machines and magnets and all this crazy stuff. And so, long story short, I spent about 5 years essentially as a full time patient, living on my disability benefits, running up a huge credit card debt, trying to get better. And it's not that I didn't get better. I kept getting worse and no one understood it. And I learned many years later, many years later, I learned I had chronic Lyme disease. That was part of it. I'd also been suffering from chemical poisoning from aspartame that had really done a number on my nervous system. So there were reasons why I was in so much pain, but no one could find them. And this went on for 5 years until I really hit rock bottom. And that's when I agreed to have an experimental surgery. I was desperate to work with any doctor that would have me because I wanted to do anything to get out of pain. And he thought he had this experimental surgery that could help me. And long story short, I went and had the surgery and I woke up and my right arm was paralyzed. And so that was really kind of rock bottom. With one arm, it really wasn't safe for me to drive. I struggled just to feed myself. I had tried a whole bunch of different things to try to get my arm to move. They did manipulations, they put me in splints, and nothing helped. I had a second operation, which didn't really help. They put me in a CPM machine, which is this big hydraulic monster to force your limb to move. It was a nightmare. And it was about 6 months after that this problem had happened with my arm that my Aunt Lauren had told me about this woman. Her name was Terry. And Terry and my Aunt Lauren had worked together for years. And Terry had had her own major health crisis and she almost died. And she found this process of alternative medicine using something about the subconscious mind and theta brainwaves that not only had saved her life, but she was so excited about it, she was quitting her corporate job to be a full-time healer. And at first, when I heard that, I laughed. I thought, oh, wow, this lady's really gone off the deep end of the new age pool, right? Why would you do that? But anyhow, my aunt kept bugging me and she's like, Brent, you got to see Terry. You got to see Terry. And I was like, no, Lauren, it's not going to help. I've been to Reiki healers and pranic healers and done all this crazy stuff and ran up this big debt and nothing works for me. And so we had this back and forth. And eventually she said, okay, Brent, I'll tell you what, you go see Terry. Number one, I will pay for it. And number two, I'll take you out to lunch. I thought about it. I'm like, all right, I got nothing else going on. I'll take you up on that. And so that's the only reason I went to see her. To me, I just saw it as a free lunch. And so I went to see Terry. She talked to me a little about the power of the subconscious and said that it was something in my subconscious that was causing my arm to be frozen. And that seemed like a big claim, but I was like, all right, what do
Sure.
we do with this? And I remember she asked me a lot of questions about my childhood and what had happened with my best friend and all the pain I'd been in and all the millions of dollars I'd lost. And I remember it was all very interesting, but the whole time I'm kind of thinking, okay, lady, it's all well and good to talk about our feelings, but that's not really why I'm here. I'm here because I can't move my arm and I'm in a lot of pain. That's all I cared about. And of course, at the time, I didn't see the connection between all the emotional and the physical. And so at the end of our session, she was doing this subconscious block clearing thing, and it was all kind of interesting. And at the end of our session, she said, "Okay, dear, let's heal your arm now." And I'm thinking, "Yeah, lady, you and what army, right?" And so I'm just looking out the window, thinking about what I want to have for lunch. And I remember Terry went into this trance. She closed her eyes and kind of went quiet for about 30 seconds. And it was the weirdest thing. She's in the middle of doing some healing trance, and I felt this loud crack and pop in my arm. It was like a little firecracker went off. And I remember it went kaboom. And I remember I said something like, whoa. I couldn't believe it. And I remember Terry opened her eyes and she's like, okay, let's try your arm now. And I went to move my arm and I couldn't believe it, but I got my arm back. That she had
That's
done
incredible.
something to me with this energy healing that had undone the side effects of the surgery. And, I liked how you said in the intro, it wasn't just a turning point in my health. It was a turning point in my entire life. It was everything, you know?
Well, and if you don't mind, just because I used to have a roommate years ago who was he went to MIT and got his master's from MIT, and also had a bunch of friends from MIT. And let's be honest, they're not the most fun at a party. I've been with these guys who were all kind of a little nerdy. Most of them were atheists, didn't believe in anything other
Yes.
than the numbers. Right?
Science, math, logic, data.
Was that where you were until this point,
It was pretty
or did
much.
you have? Yeah,
The
yeah.
only thing is interesting, it was my study of science that kept my mind open. That
Okay.
I had studied science, especially more advanced physics. And what I learned from studying relativity and quantum physics in particular is the universe is a far stranger place than most of us realize. And a lot of what we accept as truth is just our familiar experience.
Sure.
So, and it's ironic, people will often ask me, they go, Brent, do I have to believe in anything for this to work for me? Do I have to believe in God or do I have to go to church? What I would say is this: you don't have to believe in any particular theology or idea of God for healing to work for you. You do, though, have to believe it's possible.
Okay.
And what I had learned from my study of physics was the world is so bizarre, so strange, that to rule anything out as impossible would really be quite short sighted and ignorant. So when I went into my first healing session, I did not expect it would help me. I'm the first to admit that. But I did have an idea that such a thing could be possible, even though I would
That's
have
it.
argued against it. So
Because
the
science doesn't back it up. I mean, how do you,
oh,
there had to be
actually
a
it
moment where you
does
were thinking,
if we take a
does
broad
it?
view of science.
Okay.
Because
Yeah.
what I like to look at is this: is that science is not about technology. It's not about fancy labs. It's not about degrees or guys in white coats. Science is about making a prediction and then experimenting to verify it. Science is really about
Okay.
the scientific method. And has there been scientific research into things like this? The answer is yes. There hasn't been a lot, and it hasn't been very well funded. But there have been some experiments, such as the research into mass prayer is very interesting, that it tells us quite clearly, the data is crystal clear, that there is a mathematical formula for the number of people you need to affect a group. And so there has been some scientific inquiry into this, but we're at the place where most of the science done around things like energy healing is very low quality. And
Makes sense.
what it comes down to is there has to be enough profit motive for companies to put up the money to do the research. It's really expensive to do research.
I
Even
would think.
the simplest study will cost you millions of dollars. So, are there theories that can fully explain what I call the science of miracles? Yes, there absolutely are. But we need to put a lot more emphasis in terms of priority, time, budget, focus, if we actually want to drag energy healing into the realm of science. So, is there science that supports this? Absolutely. But is it something you're going to see in a mainstream publication? Not yet.
But it
Not
sounds
yet.
like you got connected with the right person too. I know a lot of people who have done or do perform energy healing or that go to healers and they don't have that kind of an experience. That sounds almost supernatural. It's so incredible. I know it's not to say I believe it 100%. I believe you, but it's an incredible experience that, you know, not everyone
Yeah, and I want to be
is
clear to
lucky enough
everyone
to.
that if you work with me or someone that does something like this, I can't guarantee you'll have a life-changing miracle.
Right.
That's not how it
Right.
works. I also
Right.
want to be clear to everyone that it's not like all my problems got solved in that hour. That I still had terrible chronic pain, depression, back pain, issues with my neck. None of that healed instantly. The only thing that healed instantly was my arm being paralyzed by the surgery. So it was just the one thing that healed instantly. The rest of the problems were still there. That took me years to work through.
Yeah. Did you
But
continue to go to her?
I did. I worked with Terry until she passed away. That was around 2013.
So she's passed. Oh,
Yep. And it was funny that when I first started my journey, I thought learning healing would be easy because I looked at my background. I'm like, hey, I had straight A's in the most difficult major at the most competitive university on the planet. How hard can it be to learn how to do some woo woo? And it's funny that when I started my journey, I figured it would take me 6 months to master it all. It only ended up taking more like 15 years because the rabbit hole ran
yeah.
much deeper than I expected.
Sure.
Yes.
Sure. So how did your family and friends react to this? Not just the arm, but this transition for you.
One of the greatest things, greatest gifts I've gotten was seeing when I think it was Thanksgiving dinner, the year that the healing had happened to my arm, because the surgery was in February, the instant healing was in July, and I started the training in September. So by October, Tara was a friend of the family, and I'd seen her before at Thanksgiving, Christmas dinners, things like that. And I remember my mother going over to her in tears and grabbing her and hugging her, saying, "Thank you for giving my son his life back." So it was huge in that when I first told my mother about it, she thought I had joined a cult, which I think is kind of funny, because I actually got drawn into a cult when I was in college. I
Well, you
escaped.
did.
I did.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
I know way too much about cults. But my mother thought I had joined a cult. And then when she saw that I could move my arm and that I was starting to get better and I had now some not only a vision and a possibility, but a path to reclaim my life, she was all for it.
I bet. Yeah, I bet. Can you speak a little bit about movement feedback? Is it holography?
Yeah, I like pronounced movement feedback holography.
Holography. Okay. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so up to this point, we focused on what I call the first big miracle,
Yeah.
when my elbow instantly healed. But one of the reasons I call this process the formula for miracles is it's not just one good thing that's going to happen to you. There's going to be a lot of amazing things that happen to you. And when I was on my journey, the short version is by working with Terry, I was able to reclaim a lot of my physical health. I was able to get probably 80% better, which was night and day different. So by working with Terry, doing what we call the second gen work, working with the subconscious one line at a time, I was able to reduce my pain significantly. I was able to start exercising. I was able to start dating. I was able to come off disability. I was able to start a company, start teaching and practicing healing like Terry. I was able to make money. I started to pay off my credit card debt, started to invest. So it was huge in how it affected me. But here's the thing I want to emphasize to everyone. The work we did was really important in helping my life move forward, but it left the me on the inside intact. It wasn't changing this me that was up there on the inside. And about 5 years later, my whole life cratered again. Well, we'll spare everyone most of the drama, but there was a woman that broke my heart that I was, again, crazy in love with that led me to disaster. I'm sure I'm the only man that's happened to, right?
I can't think of anyone else,
Yeah,
but
I
they
can't think
know.
of anyone else. But more importantly, I had started to make money and I had hired what I thought was a great financial advisor. Turned out the guy was a criminal and he stole over $55 million from over 300 people, including me. And so not only did he steal all the money I'd given him to manage, he also took out fraudulent loans in my name and was using them as leverage to, you know, fund some Ponzi scheme. And so that was really difficult because when I realized what was happening, I went to an accountant and he looked through everything and he said, Brent, you're over $1 million in debt. Do you realize that? And he told me the only way out was bankruptcy. And that was very painful because, again, I had put so much work into recovering my life. I've been such a deep pit. And I remember that when I went bankrupt, it really felt like it was game over. That, it had been 10 years since I had been told by the doctor I'd never work again. It had been 5 years since I'd had the miracle with Terry. And I lost all of my money and ended up deep in a hole. And it's funny, I met Carl Wolf, the man I consider my late mentor, the day after I declared bankruptcy. And here's the thing, that the traditional healing I had done with Terry is really powerful stuff. And it's exactly the tools I would use if I had some physical or emotional issue with me or my family. But there's a lot of things it cannot do. That it cannot increase your presence. It cannot wake you up spiritually. And it doesn't change this you that's living on the inside. And when I met Carl, it was really an eye opener because I had gotten referred to him by my life coach because he had told me, Brent, you're such a head case. I don't know what to do with you. So he kicked me up the food chain to the master. And when I had my first session with Carl, he told me, meet me by the rollerblade rental station on Venice Beach. And I was like, what? That didn't make a lot of sense, right? I expected energy healing. I expected a Buddha statue and a bead curtain and maybe some water with cucumber in it. Wasn't expecting Venice Beach. But anyhow, and so I met Carl and he told me to rent rollerblades and I rented the rollerblades and put them on. And then he spent about 20 minutes videotaping me while I rollerbladed around the parking lot. And again, this all seemed very odd as I'm like, I'm here for a healing session. Why is this guy having me rollerblade, right? And after we finished with the skating, I remember we sat in his truck and he had a little portable VCR and he played the tape. And he watched the videotape of me rollerblading and just kind of criticized me. And he was telling me, oh, you're leaking energy here and you can't feel your right arm here and you're out of relationship here. And honestly, it was just a bunch of criticism. And I went home and I actually felt really upset. I felt I had been ripped off because I remember telling my life coach, dude, I spent my last $500 pre-bankruptcy at your request and paid some old guy to criticize how I rollerblade. How the heck is that going to help me, right? And I remember he said, Brent, I get it. Carl's out there. The movement work is different than anything you've seen. He said, do me a favor, give it 3 weeks. And he said, if 3 weeks passes and you really feel you got nothing out of the session, let me know. We'll see if we can make it right. And I remember talking to him, marked down on my calendar, all right, 3 weeks out, call him back, chew his butt off, get my money back. But the crazy thing was, after doing this movement with Carl, this rollerblading, I started making money like I never had before. It was the weirdest thing that it didn't even take 3 weeks. It took 3 days. That on Monday, I declared bankruptcy. On Tuesday, I had my first movement session with Carl. And by Thursday night, I had over $50,000 in the bank. And I had never
How does
seen anything like that
what is
happen
the
before.
connection? What is the connect? I mean, I can see the healing on the body, right, with
Yep.
the arm, but what
Right.
is the connection? And did
That's
you
why this is
continue to
so
see him?
strange.
Yeah. Yeah,
Didn't make
absolutely.
any sense to me. And the way I would describe it is I see self-improvement as technology. That if we look at something like the law of attraction or the secret, I would call that, well, first generation technology. Simple, positive thinking, masterminds, mantras, vision boards, things like that. When I started working with Terry, she knew how to directly change my subconscious. That's what I would call the second generation. That basically your first generation self improvement is your usual positive thinking, the secret, the law of attraction. In the second generation, then we get into things like hypnosis that can change the subconscious. So you get processes like NLP or Psych K or emotion code or healing code that have these different ways. Sometimes you tap on the body or say mantras or different ways of shifting the energy. And I had found that very useful for physical healing. But what Carl did with me was an entire level beyond anything I'd seen before. And you got to remember, when I first had my first movement session with Carl, it's not like I was fresh off the New Age boat. I had been a full-time professional healer for 5 years at that point. I had hundreds of my own clients. I had seen hundreds of incredible results. I had taught hundreds of classes. I mean, I could go on and on. So it's not like I was new to it, but it didn't make any sense to me. And what it comes down to is the very short version. Carl introduced me to a whole nother level of the work that I had never seen before that changes the you on the inside. Through this process of watching people move their physical bodies and beaming them with a certain meditative energy, and then giving feedback on the movements, there's a really powerful internal reprocessing that occurs. And if I had another hour, I could talk you all through it.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
one, that would probably bore the people that aren't into all the technical details like me. And two, not necessary to fully understand it.
Right.
But
Right.
it was a whole
Right.
nother level of the work involving a meditative aspect and physical movement that is designed really to increase what we might call your presence, your charisma, how much you are in the now.
So
And that's how it triggered this huge shift in my business. It was a change in me.
it was a change in you.
Yep.
Yeah.
It was that simple.
How has that experience influenced how you work with people now? Do you have similar ways? Do you do
Yeah,
that yourself?
I did. It was funny that when I first met Carl, I was working on creating my own modality. And I had been working on it for years. And when I experienced the work from Carl, that all stopped. And I went right back to the drawing board. And so, what I would say is, I'm going to make a little distinction for everyone between what's metaphysical and what's spiritual. That the metaphysical work is learning how to use the invisible forces. So, learning how to harness the power of the subconscious. Intuition would be metaphysical. Learning how to clear space, how to bless your food, manifesting mind power processes, energy healing. These are all specific techniques and processes that use the unseen forces of the world to create results. But there's nothing really spiritual about it. So almost all of the law of attraction and energy healing and hypnosis work you see out there has good metaphysics, but there's nothing spiritual about it. Carl's work is, in addition to being powerfully metaphysical through the movement, is also spiritual in that we're constantly asking, what is this you up in your head? Where does that come from? What is its nature? How does it work? And what I would say the difference is that most people are people that come to the self-improvement world just want to be told what to do to get what they want. And I was like that too when I first came to this world. There's nothing wrong with that. That's how we are as human nature, right? I'm in pain. I want to not be in pain. Do something to me, right? I want to make more money. I don't know how to do that. Do something to me. And so that's the metaphysical aspect. But the spiritual is touching on what is this awareness on the inside. And that is probably the best short answer I can give. That Carl's work didn't just change how my body felt or how much money I made. It shifted what I think of as me in the middle of all this. And that change has enormous ramifications. And, for a lot of this stuff, I wouldn't have believed it either had I not lived through this. If me and everyone I know hadn't seen me not be able to move my arm for almost 6 months, and then all of a sudden one day, boom, it started working, I'm not sure I would have believed it either if I hadn't lived through it. Same thing with Carl. When I met Carl, I was bankrupt. I really thought I could never make money again. I had no idea I was just minutes away from this incredible shift.
It's incredible.
Yeah. And
Really, really.
I also want to be honest with everyone. Just want to be clear, just because you've experienced miracles doesn't mean your life is perfect. We all have challenges. Both of my master teachers I've discussed today, both Tara and Carl, both passed away. So none of us lives forever. None of us has a perfect life. And because I don't want people to get the idea that, oh, Brent can bang you with his magic wand and then everything in my life will be exactly how I want it. As far as I know, there is nothing like that. But there are techniques and schools of study that can produce enormous benefits to your life. And to give a sense of how weird the third generation work is, the movement, the beaming, what we call the Carl stuff, as I learned it from Carl Wolf. When I first learned healing from Terry, it took me 1.5 years from my first session until I was teaching it. With Carl, it took me 7 years. Yes. Because it was so weird and so different.
I've never heard anything like it. I mean, I've never heard anything like it.
And I had
I
not
think this
either.
is
And I
fascinating.
still feel
Yeah.
to this day incredibly blessed that I came across this man and that he taught me all this really weird stuff because I never could have figured it out on my own.
Well, I think that people listening to this are going to feel incredibly blessed that they came upon this interview, because I find it to be one of the most engaging and fascinating conversations that I've had doing this show. Honestly, it's just absolutely fascinating. You've performed over 25,000 private sessions, I think you said, and witnessed nearly 2,000 instant healings. So is there one that stands out for you that just gives you chills? I mean, the one that yours gives me chills, but
Yeah. I'll tell you the one that gives me chills was my son. And
really.
this wasn't just me. This was a group healing I did with Carl Wolf, my mentor. Very long story short, when my wife was pregnant with our son, she had a silent bleed at 22 weeks and she almost died. And I had to rush her to the hospital in the middle of the night. And the doctors told me that odds were that they would both die. And I remember we called Carl, woke him up in the middle of the night. He came out to the hospital. We did a group healing process on her. And the doctors were amazed. They told me that they expected her and the baby to die, but that something strange happened and the tear in the womb had somehow sealed itself up and it refilled with fluid. And none of the doctors or nurses had ever seen anything like that happen before. And so it was still a rough pregnancy, but instead of being forced into labor at 22 weeks, which is incredibly dangerous, even at the best NICUs in the world, our son stayed in to 32 weeks. And that's a pretty, that's a pretty safe time to have a baby. So the one that still gives me chills and still wakes me up in the middle of the night is that one, because that
Yeah,
was
I
my
would
wife and
think.
son. And it's hard for me to relate what it's like to have a doctor tell you that your wife and son will probably be dead before you see them again.
I can't even imagine.
Yeah. But
Truly.
thank God for Carl and his magic. And
Right.
there was some magic to him, and it's crazy that when I first met Carl, he told me later, I was more stuck in my head than anyone he had ever met in his entire life. Isn't that amazing? And
Yeah.
10 years later, I became the only person he's ever given permission to teach and practice this work.
Really.
So I was the most unlikely of students.
Yeah.
If you had asked Carl after my first session when I was rollerblading, hey, is this the guy that's going to pick up your torch and carry it for you when you're gone? He probably would have laughed you out of the room.
Yeah. Right. Right. Yeah. The awakening dynamics and the formula for miracles, was that his, or is that you?
That's mine.
That is yours? That
Really,
is yours.
what I did was I took the best of all the conventional modalities out there, things people would be
Hmm.
familiar with, like emotion codes and healing codes and NLP. And it took me a lot of years, but I synthesized the metaphysics and the spirituality together to create one coherent framework to teach people both. And I would say, I have a very different angle and approach than most,
Hmm.
that I'm not your typical New Ager. You're not going to see me wearing a lot of robes, or there's no Buddha statue or bead curtain here. I have no problem with those things. That's just not me. I'm an engineer. I solve problems.
Yeah. Yeah.
So for people that are serious about facing their darkness and digging deep on the inside to make changes in your life, I'm the one you need. There's no one that can work with this the way I can. At the same time, I'm not for everyone. I'll warn everyone, I am intense. I work quickly. I don't have a lot of patience for nonsense or time wasting, because I see everyone as a puzzle to help solve, to help them bring out the inherent self. And it's crazy because what I found doing Carl's work is, whatever you're naturally wired to be, if you would simply surrender and be that which you are, you'll do great. But we're so screwed up in our heads. We all have this mythological character we've created, and we're trying to force the world around us to accept this narrative. And we wonder why we struggle, you know?
Yeah.
So I would
Yeah.
say, one, if you're not a head case, if you don't think too much, I may not be the right teacher for you. That's my
You're not
specialty.
a head case.
Yes.
Yeah.
My specialty
Well,
is people that have too much education, that think too much, that are struggling because you've been lied to about your life. We've all been fed this lie. If you're a good little boy, a good little girl, and you grow up and listen to your parents and do well in school, that you'll be rewarded with a good life. That's a bunch of nonsense.
yes, it is.
My goal is to connect with people that really want to make a serious improvement and are willing to spend the time, the focus, the energy, the money to do so. Because
Mhm.
again, I can't promise you'll have a life-changing miracle in the first hour. It's happened. It's happened plenty of times. But what I'm about is, let's find out what's really going on deep inside of you. I see every person as being like a pile of computer software. The subconscious is nothing more than software.
Is there psychology to this?
There's a lot of psychology. And the main system that Terry had learned and taught, it was based on neuro-linguistic programming, NLP. And Carl Wolf's stuff psychologically he was very much a student of Joseph Campbell and Carl Jung. So there is a lot of psychology to it, though the psychology stays pretty low level. In other words, we have a little bit of framework and vocabulary we work with, but for the
Uh-huh.
most part, we don't spend too much time on it because we're interested in the true nature of the self. What is this you that's up in your head? How does it work? What separates you from everything that is not you? That's the spiritual piece. And that ultimately we all come to this world for the metaphysics, because who doesn't want to be able to clear a few blocks and make an extra $5,000 a year? That sounds good, right? Can we
Absolutely.
do that? Of course we can do that. Who doesn't have level 3 pain that you want to reduce it down to a level 1? Of course you do. So we come for the metaphysics, but we stay for the spirituality. And what I found is people come to me because they want to learn the techniques to understand the truth. And that's what I'm here for. I'm here to tell you the truth. But what's funny is people come for the knowledge, but they stay for the community. And
So
that's
there's a community. There's a
there's
community
absolutely a
around what you
community.
do.
And
Yeah.
long term, that's probably the most important thing to me, is to keep the community thriving. Because none of us can do this on our own. And the only reason I was able to make the shifts I've made and create the progress I have in my life is because people before me, like Tara and Carl, gave me the opportunity, gave me the tools, ran the practice groups, ran the sessions, ran the seminars. And that's what I'm trying to do now, to
Do
create
you
the
work
community.
virtually?
I do work almost entirely virtually,
Okay. So people
almost
can be
entirely.
anywhere.
People can be
People can
anywhere.
be anywhere. They don't have to be in Venice Beach riding a pair of
Nope.
roller
I'm
skates
actually in
for you to
Las
work with them.
Vegas now,
Oh, you are in Las Vegas.
but
Okay.
I
Yeah.
only do in-person sessions for my most advanced students. So once or twice a year, I will have a small group out, and because there are some things you have to be in the same room to do.
Okay.
But other than that, 98, 99% of what I do is online.
Could Terry have healed your arm virtually, do you think? Or
Yeah,
did that have to be in
absolutely.
person? Oh, yeah. So that
Yeah.
can be done virtually.
Yes. Yeah.
Fascinating. So what's the first step you'd encourage people to take today if they're feeling stuck, whether it's
I
physically,
would
emotionally,
say
or spiritually?
most important thing is head to my website
Hmm.
at awakeningdynamics.com. And there's a couple great resources there for people that want to learn more. Now, for people that want to learn more, kick the tires a little bit, I'd encourage you go to my YouTube channel. There's a link to it right on my main page of my website. That's a great way to get to know a little more about me and the work. I got a couple hundred videos there. Go nuts. For people that feel that this might be a good fit for them, and I'll ask, please only do this if you're serious. What I'm going to offer is, for every single person listening here, watching the show, I'm going to give you 20 minutes with me for free, because I want to determine if you're a good fit for this work. And so we'll do a 20-minute discovery call. I'll ask you a couple simple questions about, what is your goal? What's your challenge? What resources do you have to get there? What have you tried before? And my goal in the 20-minute call is to get to know a little about you, because if you had come to me 20 years ago, I just wanted to have as many clients and students as I could. More people, more money, more change. What I've learned is that's not how it works. I have to be rather defensive of who I let into the community, because having one wrong person can wipe out the whole thing. So that's why I'm willing to spend my time with everyone up front to ensure there's a good fit before any big amount of time or money is spent. Because I only want to work with people that I feel are really going to get the big results. And not everyone is there, because again, I'm intense. I work very quickly. I have no patience for nonsense or time wasting. I'm here to solve the problem. If that's you, I will be a breath of fresh air. One of the things people love about my videos and my trainings is they're very fast-paced. I'm not going to say the same thing 200 different times in different ways to fill a weekend. No. My goal is, here's the problem, here's the solution, this is what we do. And if
Yep.
you're willing to face your darkness, if you're willing to get uncomfortable, I can guide you back into the light. But it's very much like what I found working with addicts. Can I help people get off addictions? Of course, but they have to really want to change.
That's true.
So like one time I had a client come to me, one of my regular clients, she goes, Brent, I'm a smoker. I don't want to quit. I just want to cut down a little bit. And I was like, yeah, it's not how it works, right? When you're ready to quit and you're serious about this, let me know. And so all of our lives are like that. If you're really serious about making the shift and you're willing to go into the darkness and be uncomfortable, I'm here to guide you through it. But if you just want everything to stay as it is and you're not willing to do the work or get uncomfortable, I'm probably not the best choice. And heck, if you want someone that's just going to hug you and tell you it's okay, that's not me. I'm going to tell you what the problem is and how we solve it. That's why I say, for some people, I'm a huge breath of fresh air. They love it. Someone that actually goes in, really listens to you, and finds a solution to what's bothering you. But if you just want someone to hug you and tell you it's okay, I'm too expensive. There's plenty of people that charge less than me that can do that for you.
Love it. Love it. Brent, thank you for sharing. I mean, this really is a remarkable journey, and I know it's going to resonate with a lot of people. And for those curious, again, if you want to experience Brent's work firsthand, visit his website. Again, that's awakeningdynamics.com. And I guess you'll find a big button right on the homepage for his next live webinar too. And you can join in his interactive exercises and demonstrations. And as always, I'm grateful that you spent this time with us here on the Enlightened Life podcast. To learn more about upcoming episodes, book a reading, or check out my next live event, visit my website at mediumscottallan.com. And if you found value in today's conversation, please share the episode, leave a review, and keep exploring the mysteries of your own journey. Until next time, keep seeking, keep growing, and remember, transformation is always possible.